We just completed a pretty unique bathroom remodel, and my guess is that many of you have never seen anything quite like it. I'll be doing videos over various aspects of this remodel over time, but the reaction I'm getting from most people who see pictures of it for the first time is that they have to do a double take. Even though they may not find it to be their particular style, it is still very interesting. I'm a lot more traditional in my own preferences as well, but this was a fun project to do, and it has really grown on me while working on the remodel. At the end of the job, one thing we were trying to do was figure out a creative way to make shelves in the shower area. Since the tile has very much of a concrete block look to it, and the solid surface countertop is very similar in color to the tile, we decided to make shower floating shelves out of the extra countertop material. So I thought some of you might enjoy seeing the process as to how I built these. Now I have a bit of history on YouTube doing videos on floating shelves, particularly on how to make strong floating shelves. But in this case, strength is not a particular issue because the shelves are not wide, and the bigger concern is really making everything watertight after the shelves are installed. The solid surface countertop material is 1/2 inch thick when it's purchased, but it can be built into whatever thickness and configuration it needs to be depending upon its final use. So the challenge for me was to come up with a way to secure shelves to a tile wall and limit the number of holes I need to drill through the tile to hold the silly things in place. I end up with solid surface scraps left over anytime I do a countertop job, and I've wondered about things I could do with those scraps. I've thought about building some floating shelves, but I really haven't explored the idea. A single thickness of the 1/2 inch solid surface material alone wouldn't really work because it's not very strong by itself. So building shower shelves meets a real need that I have, as well as lets me explore design ideas a little bit on how I might use other pieces of this leftover material. We came up with just a simple design for the shower shelves, so I set up the pattern to cut that on the CNC machine. I could have done this with a little more effort using a router and making templates to cut the build-up pieces, but obviously once the CNC machine is set up and ready to go, it's the easiest way to do this. I'm building the shelves to be 1.5 inches thick, so that's 3 layers of the 1/2 inch material. At the widest point, it's only about 5 inches wide. I'm making this middle layer hollow. The reason for that, as opposed to making it solid, will be more evident when we get ready to do the installation itself. But in the meantime, the top and bottom pieces are solid, and the interior piece will have a 1/2 inch open space inside the shelf. By making the shelves 3 layers of material thick, we're adding a lot of strength to the shelves. The glue that's used for solid surface material is color matched to the solid surface pattern, and is a 2-part epoxy type of acrylic adhesive that will set up in about an hour, give or take. At that point, it's ready to mill and cut, which makes working with solid surface an enjoyable thing to do. You do have to have some specialized tools to work with it, and although I don't do it all the time, I do enjoy it when I get the opportunity to do a project. Once you get your material cut, the process for completing what you're working on is very predictable because of the glue setup time and because you're kind of forced to work within those time constraints. After the glue ups are done, you're basically routing and sanding and polishing the project. So you see your final results rather quickly too. So my total time for building these shelves was probably 3 hours of actual work, and I think they turned out pretty well. I used a 1/4 inch roundover bit for my router to cut a slight profile on the edge of the shelves, and then sanded with 100 grit sandpaper and finished with 220 grit, which left a slight matte finish on the shelves. But with the color matched adhesive holding the 3 layers together and sanding off any cut marks from the CNC machine and router bits, the joints disappear and the shelf looks like a solid piece of material. And that's one of the really cool things about working with solid surface material. While I was building the shelves, in the back of my mind I was processing what was going to be involved in actually installing these things, and I still didn't have a definitive plan on what was going to be the best route to go. I had sort of planned for hitting studs with all thread rods, but wasn't sure how precise I was going to be in finding studs once the tile was up. I only wanted to drill 2 holes per shelf, and whereas the shelf placement was still up in the air, I figured there was a pretty good likelihood that I was not going to hit studs with all 4 holes.
Well, it hasn't been a picnic by any means. This tile is really tough to drill through with brand new masonry bits as well, but I think I've got it now. All right, I think that looks pretty good. Yeah, you ever have crap like this that happens? I have these two holes to get lined up with the bolts, and I'll end up with silicone all the way to my elbows here in a minute.
All right, I finally got the shelf to slip over both rods and then pressed it tightly against the tile, and it snugged up well. All that's left to do is to remove the excess silicone squeeze out with my fingertip and a paper towel. I'll leave this thing alone and let it set up overnight. Since it's late in the day, I'll wait until tomorrow to tackle the last shelf and not press my luck. The next day, the shelf I installed the day before was rock solid, which gave me confidence that this installation process may work out fine, which was a good thing because the positioning of this shelf today was such that I did not have a stud accessible to drill into. So to install the rods for this shelf, I made the holes in the tile for the rods very snug so that the rods would thread right into the holes quite nicely. This is also an exterior 2x6 wall which has insulation bats in it, and the exterior side of the wall has 1/2 inch wood sheathing attached to it. So I made the rods long enough that I could run them through the insulation and let them make contact with the outside wood sheathing. Also, I thought it wouldn't hurt to sand a point on the rod so that the point could rest against the wood sheathing as well. Anyway, since the shelf and the rods are going to be silicone to the wall on the inside of the shower tile, it seemed reasonable that this installation approach should work fine, particularly with how solid the first shelf installation turned out to be. If we have any trouble with this approach, I'll try something else, which would be easy to do at that time. But my guess is this will last as long as the shower lasts, which should be a long time.